Doing some new technology here for streaming, and it's almost too easy. I don't quite trust it, but what choice do I have? Okay, we'll get started here in a second as soon as I pull up this and do a little of this. Yep, and have a little of this. All right. Right. Okay. All right. Well, hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. A special welcome to those of you who are joining me live via the Integral Life YouTube page or the Developmental Politics Facebook group. I appreciate both organizations co-sponsoring me, Integral Life and the Institute for Cultural Evolution. Thank you. Today, I'm going to veer off of current events a little bit, at least in terms of politics and war and peace and that sort of thing, and take a look at the evolution of consciousness in the arts, and in a particular work of art that is about to debut that I'm very excited about. I've enjoyed it very much. It's a new oratorio, which is a classic choral form of classical music. And it is written by my guest today, Steve Banks, who is a British composer. And he is, explicitly integrally informed and inspired. He has a new podcast on Integral Life where he interviews other integrally inspired artists. And this is a major new work. It's probably he considers it the first integral oratorio. It's called Blue Pearl, a one world oratorio. And it will be performed live for the first time in London next month. And the work itself is a fascinating example of integral consciousness. It's rooted in the Western sacred choral tradition that we know, George Frederick Handel and those guys, but its spiritual inspiration is explicitly integral. Steve is a devoted integral practitioner, and his work explicitly celebrates the integration of the diversity of humanity and self, culture, and nature that is the sort of integral seed. And the central image, the blue pearl, is the image of the Earth as seen from space, as a fragile, living, conscious planet. The text of the oratorio was written by Ken Wilber, Thich Nhat Hanh, and Steve himself. These are from writings of these, Ken Wilber and Thich Nhat Hanh and Steve himself. As I said, the world premieres next month. It's going to be May 14th, 2022 at the St. Giles Cripplegate Church in London. It will be performed by the London Mozart Players and two choirs, the Excelsius Choir and the Vox Farnham Chamber Choir. It is conducted by Rob Lewis, and you can attend. I'm going to attend. It's going to be live streamed, so you can attend that way. I think it's $10 a ticket, and you can listen to it for some period of time afterwards if you can't make it live. But, if you can travel to London or if you're in the vicinity, go. It will be a marvelous event. So I am going to play my conversation with Steve now. I talked to him on Monday. And I start out by asking him, how he got into integral and the story of the creation of Blue Pearl, a one world oratorio. So here's our conversation.
I got very heavily into Ken's writing,
Okay.
Sex ecology, spirituality. It took a few books before kind of suddenly there was like an avalanche.
Yeah.
But then I just read everything I could.
And so this would have been in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So you're a musician at the same time?
Yeah.
Maybe give us a little bit of that lineage.
Yes, sure. So, I did work as a classical violinist in London played with orchestras like the London Symphony Orchestra and various other ensembles. And music has always just somehow, it's been almost like my first language in a way. I don't know. I think I wrote my first song in around 1993. So songwriting was for me a big part of that personal development journey. I found I wrote quite a few songs that were explicitly about issues that I was kind of dealing with in that path. And then later on, as I got into meditation, Buddhist meditation, like the song "Be Still," which is in the Blue Pearl Oratorio, I wrote that a long time ago, and that was from my very first weekend, Buddhist weekend I ever did, which was in the early 90s with a well-known Tibetan Rinpoche in London. And he did this absolutely beautiful summary of meditation with gestures and just 3 phrases. And I can still, so I paraphrased that to make the song "Be Still." I put it into my own words. But I still remember his beautiful expression. It was, you had bring the mind home, release the grasping, relax into your Buddha nature. It's just a beautiful, very succinct summary of meditation.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So then, several years later, actually 4 years later, after writing that string quartet, I was sitting in a rehearsal for the Verdi Requiem, which is a piece I love since childhood. This suddenly the thought came into my mind: is there a piece like this but integral? An obvious question for me at that point, really.
Yeah.
And I looked around a bit online. I couldn't find anything, so I thought I'd have a go at writing one.
Yeah. Well, it's, as you say, this piece is rooted in the Western sacred choral tradition, which I love myself personally. And so you're coming up through that, and just if the evolution of consciousness and culture are true, then there is an expression of that at this integral stage.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're going for, and I think you have really expressed it beautifully. So maybe we shift into talking about the piece itself, how it came to be, and maybe share some excerpts from it.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote it on and off in kind of bursts over 6 years. So the whole thing took 6 years. And the writing of it was, I did an interview with Psychosynthesis podcast, and I saw on her website a lovely quote from Picasso, who said that the meaning of your life is to find your gift. And the purpose of your life is to give it away, which I think is a lovely, So the writing of this piece has been an extraordinary gift for me. I mean, I just, beyond absolutely priceless. There's a kind of sense of, I had this real desire, a real strong, wouldn't it be wonderful to have music that really kind of conveyed integral.
Well, let me just pause there.
Yeah.
Steve, because, My experience with Integral was that it was like the scales fell from my eyes, that there was a different way of seeing this world and experiencing this world. And I felt the updraft of evolution in my body in ways, so it was like all changes of worldview and religious conversions. You become a new person in a way. So this is very exciting. And is that true for you? And, for me, it just reoriented my life. Maybe what's your experience of it? Absolutely.
I can't imagine my life without it. It's cognitively, I had a way to think about and place my spiritual experiences and my spiritual desire with meditation. I suddenly, here was a map where I could be rational and all these other things at the same time. But also, it's a quote that Bensei's used in the Integral European Conference blurb sometimes. I wrote to him after I went to the first Integral conference I went to was in 2018 in Hungary, and I went into an altered state for several days during that conference.
Wow.
And partly found the dance experiences. I did 3 dance workshops, and they just completely sort of activated this. I suppose, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but I just felt kind of tuned in on all levels and just really humming with, and that sense of what you're just describing. I think that the updraft, I love that the updraft of evolution and also even on the online ones, which surprised me, the online ones which I've been to since, I had the similar experience, being with these people from all around the world, having these conversations in breaks and in the lunch with people who were just inspiring to talk to,
Yes.
and just kind of mutual resonance,
Yes. Mutual resonance is well put.
Yeah. And I found myself, it was literally like an image, like this kind of stuff kind of beaming into my head, telling me to convey in my presentation that we are earth beings. And the piece is called Blue Pearl. Blue Pearl is the image of the earth seen from space as a whole. And I'm kind of full of, as it were, I'm full of the understanding that I sitting here and you sitting there are the earth evolved. So, from rocks to plants to animals to humans, it is a continuum. And we are rocks that think and feel. And I got everyone on my Zoom in my presentation. I got everyone to rename themselves Earth in capitals, hyphen, and then their name.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of putting that first.
Yeah.
Before and as Ken says, in his books, talking more about us being the cosmos, expressing itself and aware of itself. It's just the same thing, but for the earth, that we are primarily, or you can tune into that aspect, that we are the earth, awake, aware of itself, currently, sadly, injuring itself.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it changed my life.
So this is then you expressing that artistically in this choral form.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your creative process and how it came together, and then share a piece for us.
Yes, sure. So where I started, it was very clear where to start, was with this piece of writing by Ken in the July entry in One Taste, his book One Taste, which came out in 2000.
Yeah, and it's kind of a diary of his life at that time.
Yeah.
Wonderful book.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely a wonderful book. So anamnesis, for those that haven't read it or heard about it, it means unforgetting or remembering. And apparently he talks about a sort of preamble about it, that he was coming out of a sort of causal level meditation. In other words, a kind of a God identity, divine identity meditation. And of course, in that meditation, there is nothing because it's formless. But as he came out, he had this experience over 15 minutes, which he compares to when someone dies. They're said to experience the whole of their life in a flash, which is, of course, a kind of a trans-rational, trans-personal thing, because how can you experience all of that time in a flash? But anyway.
Yeah, outside of time, apparently you can.
Outside of time, yeah. So he says that he had a similar experience, but instead of his life, he was remembering the life of the whole universe. Mm. And so then he went to try and convey that experience in words. So he's got these little vignettes, beautiful little vignettes of a first-person portrayal of the evolution of all the different stages of the evolution of the universe, and so the different levels of consciousness evolving. Yeah. And because it's written in the first person, he's got these little scenes of people imagining being an actual person. I thought it was very poetic. And the passages towards the end are absolutely beautiful, the kind of transpersonal. So I thought that would be wonderful to set to music. So that's where I started. And that piece, Anamnesis, comes near the beginning of the Oratorio. And it's kind of, I see it as the backbone of the whole piece. It gives you the spectrum of consciousness, right from, in fact, there's a piece before it, which is Evolution 5, which starts with the Big Bang. Uh-huh. So Evolution 5 takes you from physical evolution through the formation of the Earth and through biological evolution in 5 minutes, right up to the arrival of human beings. And then Anamnesis, as it were, unfolds that human evolution to all the layers of the spectrum of consciousness. Yeah, and so beautifully. Thank you. Yeah, and let me just say that for people who want to check this out, it's at stevebanks.info. stevebanks.info. And you have many excerpts. And well, actually, the whole piece is there. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. And which adds up to how long is the whole piece? It's an evening's concert, so it's about 85 minutes of music. Yeah. Wonderful. And I have to say also that you have all the lyrics and you have your explanation of the integral map and the integral vision. It's really quite informative. I ended up spending a lot of time just on your website. Oh, good. So I encourage it to people, stevebanks.info. Thank you. All right, so this will be, this is posted on there, and you're going to share a little bit of it now. And this is, again, Anamnesis. I can never pronounce it. Anamnesis. So I'm going to play a little clip, which is from what he called, a section he called The Subtle. So I'm going to play the little excerpt from that. And I'll just read the words in case people can't make out the words, because they're absolutely beautiful. These are Ken's words. So it's nature retreats before its source. In this sublime vastness, light finds its own abode. Shimmering sheaths of luminous bliss, each softer yet stronger, brighter yet fainter, more intense yet harder to see. I am full to infinity in this ocean of light, ocean of bliss, ocean of love. Peace unto you, my sisters and brothers, peace. For all is well, and all is well, and all manner of things are well. The last bit being, of course, a quote from Julian of Norwich. So. Great. Yeah. So I'll play this clip now, shall I? Yes, indeed. Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. I feel a distinct state change. I'm moved to talk about what just happened, music itself. And on your site, you quote Brother David Stendhal Ross, a wonderful quote about what music is. And I'm going to read it here. And he says, every human being longs for wisdom, longs to be touched by the mystery. A good example is music. And then this is the part I love. We can't grasp music. Nobody can grasp music, but we can understand music. How do we understand music? When it grasps us, when it does something to us, then we understand. This is a big, pretty accurate image for what it means to be in touch with what I call mystery. So what you just played is transmitting something to us beyond words and thought, really, just a direct transmission. And how cool is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of my thoughts about the whole piece, kind of since I finished it, really, is that Ken talks about when you read about integral, that it's psychoactive. That lovely phrase. And I've experienced that several times, that when you get into a flow reading his book, you go into an altered state, or you get, and a real kind of wow kind of thing happens. And I think, and what, like you're just saying, music has a similar effect, but it's kind of going in through a different door to reading. And it is absolutely wonderfully mysterious why music affects us the way it does.
Yeah, because it's just sound waves. I mean, it's just hitting our eardrum. I mean, what's up with that?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Steve, I mean, I've always wondered this when I listen to choral music, classical music, or orchestral music. How do you manage to write this stuff with so many things happening at once? You've got all these instruments and you've got these voices. And tell us a little bit about that.
The short answer is, I don't know. That really is most of it. A metaphor I have for it is that it's like I created a boat. I built a boat with a sail. And I've got this real desire to, my love of music and my love of integral, this real desire to bring them together. So I build the boat, and then this wind arrives and blows in the sail.
Wow. And
where the wind comes from, I don't know. It's one moment it's not there, and the next moment it is there. And stuff appeared. I'm writing on the computer, so I'm using a piece of software because my piano skills are not up to the task. So I'm writing on the computer, and what you just said about all this stuff arriving at once, I don't know how that happens, but it happened, and I can't explain. There are some passages where it's like there's more clearly a process that I can identify involved. So, for instance, that piece, Evolution 5, this idea came that evolution is like an exponential curve. This what Ken refers to as the winding up of the universe, and how it's got kind of faster and faster. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to represent that curve in music by having the key go up? So that you have a key signature for a piece, which usually it stays the same throughout a whole piece, and you move to different keys. So in this piece, that was a kind of, you might say, that was a plan.
Yeah.
But where the plan comes from, we kind of tend to distinguish between artistic creativity, where just like, and it seems a bit miraculous somehow. This stuff appears, but actually planning is miraculous as well. Because one moment there's no plan, and then there is a plan.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
it's miraculous. So you catch that wind, and then you get into flow. I assume some way you're one with your computer program. I mean, right?
Well, you're one with I'm putting the music onto the page, and then I'm playing back what I've just written.
Okay.
So there's a kind of toing and froing between what I've just written and where it's going next. But there's this really spontaneous process, mostly, of wanting quickly to get down onto the page what's just arrived in my head. And I remember actually reading Ken talking about writing his books, that he would go into a state where he would kind of prepare, and then once he started writing, it was a very intense process over several days of just getting it down on the page. I can relate to that, but except that mine came out in smaller chunks, I think.
Yeah.
You know. And there were times when I hit blocks. So, for instance, there's the piece called "Call Me by My True Names," which is a setting of the very profound poem by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the opening theme came into my head, which has several parts. And I thought, I really liked it, but I couldn't see how it went on, the music. So then it was a case of sitting with that, hoping that something's going to happen over several months. And it did happen.
Yeah.
In a way that pleased me. So I guess it's a bit like a river. There's times when you're kind of the river's really flowing fast and you want to kind of keep up with it. And there's other times when it seems to have stopped, like a deep pool, but actually the flow goes on somewhere in your psyche.
That's right.
And part of it is sticking with the process.
Yeah.
There's a lovely quote I remember reading years ago from Rilke in his words to a young poet about being patient.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't you share another piece with us?
Yeah, sure. So Blue Pearl, again, is another song that I wrote a long time ago, in 2003, actually, which I kind of recycled and folded into the music for the Oratorio. And I wrote it on a retreat run by a really good friend of mine, who is a storyteller and created, he's an early activist with sustainability. So we did a week's kind of intense retreat about how can you communicate sustainability using the arts. And he and I went off to write songs. We went up the hill in Wales, in the beautiful oak wood there, to write songs. And this is the song that I wrote, which came out very much as a whole. I'll play a clip from that. So Blue Pearl, the text of the song is basically the earth speaking. And the earth is saying to humanity, we are one. That's basically it. And the chorus is, Blue Pearl, I turn and I turn, one world, I learn and I learn. So that being a shorthand for evolution.
Yeah.
So I'll play a bit from the middle of that, where it kind of builds up to a climax. And I'll just read the words in case they're not clear again. To you, I know it seems life runs in straight lines. You're born, you grow old, you die at your time. Listen to the turning, the changing hues. The seasons passing is me and it is you. And then there's an orchestral interlude. And then the words are, you may feel a little sad knowing you'll die. And those you love, oh me, oh my. Ashes to dust, not me, you cry. There's a garden in your heart where the red rose blooms. And in the sweet bird song, you know that you are I and I am you. And then the chorus comes back, Blue Pearl.
Beautiful.
So I'll play that now.
To you I know it seems life runs in straight lines. You're born, you grow old, you die at your time. Listen to the turning, the changing hues. The seasons passing is me and it is you. blooms, and in the sweet bird song, you know that you are I and I am you. Bluebird, I turn and I turn. One word I learn and I learn. Bluebird, I turn and I turn. One word I learn and I learn. Bluebird, I turn and I turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Steve, so you write this, and that's one thing to create this work. Another thing is to have it produced, which you're doing, and other people are going along and cooperating and have been swept up and are inspired, and we're going to have a world debut here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, you're saying that there's this recording that I've been playing these excerpts from on my website, but of course it's not actually the artwork, because it's a synthetic orchestra. There are real people singing, but it's not a choir. It's just a few people. So I haven't actually heard the piece myself yet.
Yeah.
No one's actually heard it. And indeed, the experience of people it's all going to be filmed with a high quality production, lots of camera angles and a high quality audio. So people who can't make London on the 14th of May can hear it online. And I particularly had the integral community in mind when I set up that recording and film, because the integral community being such a global community.
Yeah. And people can get tickets again at stevebanks.info.
Yeah.
And then there's a crowd sourcing funding. I can't imagine this is a big money maker, at least so far. So, right?
No, it's definitely not a money maker. ask my wife.
Yeah.
No, I tried to get, I basically, I'm putting on the concert myself, and paying all the orchestral musicians and the choir and the conductor and the venue and for the thing to be filmed and streamed live. So I set up a crowdfunding in case people wanted to chip in and be a part of that, the whole project, which I saw you just recently, you've contributed to, which
I did indeed. Yes. Yeah. And I encourage other people too, as moved, and they would do that at stevebanks.info as well. Yeah.
There's a link there. Yeah. So people can get tickets for the online, which is it's only £9. So I don't know, just over $10 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tune in live, or if it's the bad time of the night, if you're in India or Australia or somewhere, you can watch on demand for 7 days after the concert.
Yeah.
So the choir's been rehearsing since January, and I'm about to go in a couple of weeks and join them for a rehearsal, so I can give them some feedback.
Yeah.
But they're really enjoying singing the piece, and they're really excited. The conductor jumped at it when he was invited, because he, as well as being a classical musician, he loves jazz and other genres of music.
Yeah.
So he was really excited by the fact that it's not just classical; it's a crossover piece.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about that. You have influences from jazz, from reggae. I mean, you have it's quite lively, actually. It's quite surprising. It's fun to listen to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's very diverse in its styles, and in fact, my classical music friends were, they were a little bit shocked, so I did an interview for a magazine, and the woman interviewing me said, "It's not really for purists, is it?" And I said, "No, I think that's a fair comment. So it's not for everyone musically, but it's another interesting thing. I played, I wrote that Anamnesis, 20 minutes of music. I wrote that early on, and I played it to a very old friend of mine who's a classical musician but plays other genres. And he said to me, well, this sounds a bit like Handel, and this sounds a bit like Vaughan Williams, and this sounds a bit like Stravinsky. And he said, so what's your voice, your unique voice as a composer? And I was like, oh, good question. And I didn't have an answer actually for 2 years, although in hindsight, it's kind of obvious, but I didn't know the answer to that. But just in the way that the integral model brings together very diverse things like science and religion, how could they possibly fit together? Yeah. And so I think that's how I see the music. How can you possibly follow a classical serious fugue with suddenly a bit of big band jazz? And the answer is, well, it's because it's an integral piece.
Yeah.
And what I hope, and I think is what I believe is going to happen when people listen to the whole piece, it's like, I think of all the, like the chakras, like the different bells with different levels of resonant frequency going all the way up our spectrum. And what I hope is that the piece, through its different sections, it'll get all of those bells ringing. That's what I'm hoping. And that's why I think I didn't think about it cognitively at all. It was just, I just set out writing intuitively. Yeah. And I think I use different styles of music to evoke these different levels. And it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah. No, and that happened for me. I mean, I relaxed into it pretty early on. And part of it was I felt like I was in good hands somehow. It's just as simple as that. I mean, I could relax and I was going to go with this piece of music. And it was going to be interesting, and it was going to take me somewhere, and it was going to be fun, and I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next. And that's pretty good. I had a wonderful time listening to it, Steve.
That's lovely. That's lovely to hear. Yeah, it has. I mean, humor is a part of my kind of makeup, which I got from my dad, and so there's a fair bit of humor in it, including. There's this kind of serious opening with the classical fugue, and it's talking about time and eternity, and then this, one of these moments where this thing just pinged into my head, and it made me laugh when I kind of heard it in my head, and it was turning this, ancient, profound spiritual teaching that the past and the present, the past and the future being both present experiences, and the text I kind of paraphrased that with was, "What do you have for breakfast?"
Yeah.
Can you eat it now? Which is basically paraphrasing No Boundary or the Spectrum of Consciousness.
Yeah.
Or indeed, Ken has that lovely quote from Alan. Oh, I've forgotten his name now.
Alan Watts?
Yes, from Alan Watts. Yeah. About, remember walking down the street and meeting your friend. Can you talk to them now? No, you can't. They're not. They're not here. Yeah. So it's got humor in it, and especially with the sex movement, that starts off very humorously, but does become serious. That's a nice kind of segue, I think, from tongue in cheek to quite serious.
Yeah.
So that's lovely to hear, and it ends. The whole piece ends with the kind of reggae style big band, which is really about. A kind of prayer that we all may lead fulfilling lives, which I think, and that again, that's a song I wrote a long time ago, but it seemed to fit really well at the end of this whole journey of integral spirituality. It's like, so what am I going to do with my life? And I feel a bit tearful saying this, actually.
Yeah. No, it's quite moving. Do you want to play a piece?
I could play the end of the sex movement, which I think is.
The end of the sex movement tends to be quite good in general. So go for it.
So So this, I don't need to read the text because it's just the choir singing, so you can hear the words quite well. No. But essentially, this at the end here. It's saying, you can experience sex at different levels of consciousness. You can experience it at a primitive level of consciousness, which is lust, or at a kind of middle level and through the heart, which is love, or in a spiritual way. And Ken did a whole thing, didn't he, about Tantra not all that long ago. And there it becomes divine union. So sort of pre-personal, personal and transpersonal views of sex. So I'll play that then.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting that the bit of music at the end there for the spiritual bit is essentially the same music that we heard earlier in the subtle level. So there's a subtle musical link.
Yeah. Yeah. I find myself, as I listen to it more, recognizing reprises and so forth.
Yeah.
And I have to also say, I like that a lot of it's pretty. I like that you resolve things and it's uplifting in a way. I really resonate with it.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'd never got on with the kind of modern classical music, which isn't harmonic or melodic. I just don't really understand why people write that, but they obviously have their reasons. But for me, music, well, I'm thinking of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Beautiful music to me touches the heart, and I think for that you need melody and harmony.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly, that's the historic lineage. I think postmodernity wants to deconstruct all that, and
exactly.
I don't think it's meant to be enjoyed in the same way.
No, exactly.
But it's meant artistically to transmit some new, understanding of things, or something beyond understanding, or I don't know what, but it's a deconstructive move, and Absolutely. Integral is a reconstructive move.
It's interesting in terms of the musical structures that you have this very clear evolution from say the time of Bach over 300-400 years, that the harmonies got more and more complex. So the romantics like Brahms and then Wagner, and people say that with Wagner, you got to the point where there was no further to go.
Yeah.
In classical music terms, with making complexity and ambiguity within a harmonic kind of story, beginning, middle, end kind of structure. So the only move left, it seemed, was, as you say, the deconstruction, which they did thoroughly.
Yeah.
So it's for me, writing this music and being aware of integral as a postmodern movement. I was very conscious that felt like I was writing postmodern music.
Yeah. And I heard it that way too. So talk about your take on art in general, Steve. I see you're doing a regular feature on integral life with integral artists. So that means integral art. And what is that exactly?
Well, I
it's a little bit about what we're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly. I think the short answer again is I don't know. But I feel I've had interviews with Gaia Orion, the fabulous Canadian artist, and Santiago Jimenez from Colombia, who did this wonderful presentation at the last online IEC conference. And I just happened to be online because it wasn't in the program. And I suddenly heard that he was going to do this journey through the stages through music. And I was like, what? Because I'd not heard of anyone else doing that. So I was like, my brother, So, and it was fantastic what he did. And
I remember it was indeed.
Yeah, I was so excited. So I talked to him about, that the music and the levels and the stages. And then Stuart Davis I've spoken to, and also Brooke McNamara with poetry, particularly. And we did our conversation. We did a little kind of mini performance of reading some of her poems and then a bit of the Blue Pearl music. So that was lovely. So, and someone actually emailed me and said, what is how can you recognize integral music? And he said he'd asked Stuart Davis that question and never got a reply. And I still don't know the answer to that question, but I do feel that this thing about having the levels evoked, the different levels evoked, and I think of the painting, the portrait that Alex Gray did of Ken Wilber, which I'm sure you've seen, where at the front of the picture is Ken's face, physical face, and then kind of behind that is a kind of archetypal Buddhist figure, and then behind that you kind of see the cosmos and galaxies, and there may be one other bit that I've missed out, but I kind of saw that as representing the different levels, the physical, and then the subtle, and then the causal, and one taste, as it were, or the cosmic consciousness. Yeah. I think of a couple things that Ken has said that stuck with me. One is quite recent, on a conference that he was on Zoom, and I tuned in, and he talked about that in the coming integral age, people will realize that they're 12 times smarter than they thought they were. The idea being that as you enter into integral consciousness, you realize these different parts of yourself, and they become clear, and you can see the movement and the development of them and how they come online, and so you can just light up all kinds of places, And so that's one thing that I'm inspired by. And then the other one is that when we would ask him to define integral art, the answer would generally be any art that comes from an artistic consciousness that's integral. So it could be something as simple as a Zen calligraphy of a zero, or a line. But there's something that comes through. It's a little bit what you were saying earlier about just the resonance of being with people who are, at least on a good day, trying to operate in this stage. That there is a resonance. There's a X factor there. Uh-huh.
And I remember when we did the integral seminars, the whole series of seminars. I think you said you were at the first one, or one of the first ones, the integral sustainability, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah, that there is a X factor of integral practitioners getting together. There's just something that is alive and online that I don't find in any other community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with time, what integral art is, and kind of, as it were, subdivisions of integral art will kind of gradually emerge.
Yeah.
I think so. I think, from what I've kind of experienced so far, I've heard someone else say about that quote from Ken about, if an integral artist has created a work of art, there'll be something about it, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
And then there's this kind of more deliberately representing the fullness or parts of the fullness of the integral
Exactly.
map. Yeah.
And wouldn't you also say, Steve, that if you think about contemporary music in general, that just the mashups of music that we hear, just popular music, the sampling and, the fusion in general, that those are movements towards an integration of musical styles that we could recognize. It's a de facto integral,
Right.
even though people may not understand it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And that explains a bit what I've done in Blue Pearl as well.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Yeah.
and actually to do it from this lineage that felt airtight, and to blow it out a bit as you have done is very exciting. It really sort of aerates the whole form to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So something else, on this theme about art in general that's occurred to me in talking to these people and meeting artists through the Integral Conference is also the kind of the archetype of the creative artist that, certainly in classical music, but also in painting. You think of Van Gogh, or Mozart, Beethoven, these people who had essentially tragic lives and were also, you could say, messed up psychologically. Mozart's said to have behaved like a child, and Van Gogh was clearly mentally, disturbed in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that somehow you have to be that kind of person to produce art. So art comes out of the transcendence of tragedy, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And Beethoven is, the quintessential example of that, and it's absolutely the case. And I'm kind of thinking, talking to Brooke McNamara, talking to Guy O'Ryan, talking to Stuart Davis, that actually, and I, to some extent, I hope about myself. I've certainly have been messed up, and I still am to some degree. But I've done a lot of work, in terms of healing that. And I have a feeling that integral creators of integral art, integral artists, are coming from a place of wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
And, it makes me think what Ken has kind of said so fervently, really, about how all our models of development, of human development, have been broken. In the Religion of Tomorrow, he says that with great passion, about at last, by bringing together waking up and growing up, we have a model of development of human beings, which is where they can be whole.
Yeah.
They no longer have to be fragmented. And I kind of have a feeling that integral artists, they may have, experienced that fragmentation, but in creating integral art, they're expressing a wonderful, fulfilling wholeness, which is, and then saying to the people who view or hear that art, this is possible for anyone. Yes, there's always suffering in life, but you don't have to suffer in the way that a Mozart or a Van Gogh or those people suffered. You can just have an ordinary human suffering and experience wholeness.
Wow. Yeah. Beautifully said, Steve, and beautifully wrought in your piece, Blue Pearl.
Thank you.
So thank you for being with us. And again, the debut, tell us about that and where we can participate.
So it's on the 14th of May, and it's at 7:30 UK time, which is British summertime. And you can get tickets to come to London. If anyone lives anywhere near London, please come along and hear it in the church.
So what church where will it be?
A beautiful old church called St. Giles Cripplegate right in the city of London, right in the heart of London. It's a church which somehow survived the Blitz. It was all the area around was flattened, but it's stayed standing. And people around anywhere in the world can join either live for the live stream or watch it for 7 days after that. And it would be lovely, I really would love integral people to come from around the world and join for that concert, because the piece is about the unity of the earth, and to have an audience from around the world, just like the integral European conferences, would be very wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for your beautiful work. Blue Pearl, a One World Oratorio. You can get tickets at stevebanks.info and also make a contribution to this very good cause. Thank you again, Steve Banks.